Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism and narcissistic relationships. Before I go on though, please do check out the video notes. I have a healing community and this video kind of gets at some healing-y issues, but if you really want to go deep on the healing, you really want to check out my healing program. And this month, if you're seeing this in September, we have a 25% discount on the first month. So you may want to check that out. Because what this video about is today is very congruent with what survivors go through that really holds up healing. Is when survivors of narcissistic abuse are getting diagnosed themselves instead of being seen as survivors of this thing called narcissistic abuse. Now, I've seen this happen and I've watched this happen multiple times when I'm consulting on clinical cases. A survivor of narcissistic abuse will tell their story, but they'll open up with saying, I've been told I have borderline personality, or I've been told I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or I've been told I have generalized anxiety, or I have a dependent personality, or I have an adjustment disorder, or I am codependent. They'll come into my office or come into my Zoom, and then I smile politely and say, okay, can I hear your entire story first? In some of these cases, they will then often share a story of long-term narcissistic abuse, maybe in an long-term intimate relationship, maybe since childhood, maybe in the workplace, maybe all of the above. But this issue most often comes up for people who had adult intimate relationships, close relationships with narcissistic people. These people who go through relationships where they are lied to, gaslighted, manipulated, dismissed, raged at, cheated on, and invalidated, start to lose it. I've been there. I lost it too. So if a person rolls up to therapy after having gone through a narcissistic relationship or going through a narcissistic relationship, they actually don't look well put together. Survivors of narcissistic relationships may roll up and say, I just want them to suffer the way I suffered. I can't stop obsessing about this relationship. You know what? I'm going to put up a camera. I'm going to put up cameras everywhere to catch them in what they're doing. We may see also strong emotional reactions that are made so much worse by the confusion. Survivors will literally say, I'm losing my mind. So as a result, for a minute, many survivors don't look well put together. That's what those sleepless nights do to you. The other thing that happens is that many other people that these survivors run into, therapists, coaches, other folks, will jump on the idea of the struggles with abandonment that the survivor is experiencing. Things like, oh, you're just having a strong reaction to someone not being present or cheating or leaving you, and then they start making it about your abandonment issues. Now, you may have some. I'm not saying that that's not the case, but they won't account for the fact that another human being, through narcissistic abuse, did one hell of a psychological number on you. So then what happens is that survivors get diagnosed. It's not surprising. They often need that diagnosis to get insurance, right? But when we unpack their story, many survivors are actually well put together. And in fact, many survivors, once everything's explained to them, once they get a rule book, their eyes open and say, oh, this is a thing? I wasn't crazy? It doesn't mean everything just goes away. But a lot of the more agitated, confused, upset, feeling out of control may dissipate a little faster. Once you recognize that this phenomenology of narcissistic abuse is a thing and it's not just you, a lot of people do okay. I was reading a story of a rather prominent person lately, and it was so clear to me as I read the history of this person, she had experienced pretty significant narcissistic abuse in a marriage. But over time, as people watched this person's life, she was described as having a whole laundry list of psychiatric issues. She happened to be a young woman who had married someone older than her, and he was pretty indifferent, unempathic, entitled. He was unfaithful, and it took a really big toll on her. There was a lot of sort of mythology around her that there was almost something wrong with her. But even when I looked at this person and wondered, what if this person had been taught about narcissistic abuse? I always wonder if she might have been more self-forgiving, more self-compassionate. But the world liked the guy a lot more than they liked this gal, and they had no problem painting her as unhinged. I had a real problem with that. This is an old story. It's not from modern times, but it's an older tale. I think all the people are dead now. Now, the problem is that in this process, many survivors are left feeling or are formally diagnosed as though they have issues with emotional regulation, abandonment issues, dependency needs, or disproportionate anxiety. And if that label is thrown on them and they don't get the framework of what narcissistic abuse does to them, they may walk around for years saying, well, I'm the one who messes up relationship because I was told I have personality issues, or because my anxiety is so off the charts, I'm never going to be able to make a relationship work, or I'm codependent. This is what we've been doing for years, unfortunately, diagnosing the survivors instead of calling out toxic as toxic. Listen, folks, anybody, and I mean anybody subjected to a narcissistic relationship will crack. That's the nature of these relationships. I can count on one hand the number of people in my life I've met who are sort of narcissist resistant. And they tend to be people with a lot of privilege and societal power. Listen, I do this for a living. I still get played. And every time I feel as though there must be something wrong with me, that I'm an imposter, that I'm too anxious, that I've got whatever issues I've got no place teaching people about this, right? When we are in toxic relationships, we get sick. We feel crazy. We behave in ways that we would not ordinarily behave. We ruminate. We obsess. We are confused. So we don't look or act our best. And if that is the snapshot that people get out of us, and they don't understand narcissism and say stuff like, all relationships are tough, you are just having way too much trouble coping with it, then yep, the survivors are given any number of labels that they then carry around with them. The narcissistic cycles are never called out. The person blames themselves, and the beat goes on. And the survivors will carry that label even after they leave that narcissistic relationship ends, and as a result, become vulnerable to repeating these cycles, because the next time they meet someone who may be narcissistic, instead of saying, oh, hell no, I am not doing this again, they may fall back into saying, well, I've been told now that I have abandonment and dependency and anxiety issues, so I guess I just need to try harder this time and not screw this one up too. Now, is there a subset of people who go through narcissistic relationships who they themselves may have, themselves separate from the narcissist, their own clinically significant maladaptive personality issues or frank personality disorders or other mental disorders? Absolutely yes. Somewhere around 20 to 25% of the population is living with a clinically significant mental health issue at any given time. So obviously, that's going to impact survivors as well, right? But those patterns are patterns that would have predated the relationship. So you would have been like this before you met the narcissist, and that you had to manage long before the narcissistic adult relationship. If these patterns onset while you were in the narcissistic relationship, that's a different story. When a person is solid and able to maintain healthy relationships, emotional regulation, and a sense of self, and that's what gets eroded by a toxic relationship, that's not surprising. That's what we think would happen. So let's stop pathologizing survivors and educate everyone about these relationships and the impact that they have, so people can stop wondering if they are the problem and the cause of the toxic behavior, which many survivors are told. How many survivors are asked, well, what are you doing to trigger their behavior? That's nice. What is a person doing to trigger gaslighting? Very nice. That's the stuff that keeps survivors stuck. So if you are a survivor who has been told you have any number of personality or mental health issues that appear to have arisen as a result of a narcissistic relationship, tread lightly. Before you take that on as your identity, that you're the problem, ask some pointed questions of the person making that assertion about you, in terms of how much they understand about narcissistic relationship. Unfortunately, many people don't, and those people are often in a position to say, oh, if you're so anxious in this relationship, maybe it's a you thing and it's not a them thing. It's really important to get educated, because so many people will find while they're in these relationships, as the relationships end, that again, they're not at their best and will often look to the world as though they're not at the best. And the narcissist may look just fine, So as a result, it's a lot easier to point the finger at the person who doesn't look as well put together than the person who looks as charming and as well put together as always. But unfortunately, when we dig a little deeper, like I said, just about any of us would look like that if we were in that kind of relationship. Thanks again.